The Albuquerque mansion looked like something out of an old photograph. Dark wood furniture, paintings of ancestors, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the hallways. It was Augustus, the patriarch's 70th birthday, and all his children were present. Helena, the eldest daughter, radiated charm and confidence, her practiced smile flashing at each relative. Raphael, the youngest, watched everything silently, with the discomfort of someone who knows he doesn't quite belong on this stage. During dinner, conversations revolved around business and memories, but looks told different stories. Their mother, Marta, tried to maintain harmony, smiling between tense exchanges. Helena and Raphael barely looked at each other, but each felt the other's presence like an open wound. Their proud father gave long speeches, extolling the family as a symbol of unity and respect. Deep down, however, Raphael knew their union was a castle made of glass. When dessert was served, Augusto called for silence for a toast. He raised his glass and spoke about legacy, the importance of honesty and trust. Helena smiled, but her fingers trembled as she held the glass. Raphael looked away, feeling the weight of those words carry too much weight. His grandmother, sitting at the head of the table, watched everything with teary eyes, perhaps sensing that this night would be forever etched in her memory. After the toast, Helena approached Raphael with a fake smile. "Still silent, brother?" she teased, pouring more wine. Raphael only responded with a half-smile. "I prefer to listen. I learn more." Her tone was calm, but the tension between them was palpable. Her father watched them, not fully understanding what was happening. When the night was over, Raphael went upstairs to his room and looked out the window. Outside, the garden was lit by the party lights. He could hear Helena's laughter coming from downstairs. He wondered when it had changed, when the childhood complicity had given way to rivalry. Perhaps, he thought, some families only seem perfect until one takes a closer look. Before this family's fate crumbles, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what happens between these brothers will leave you breathless. Don't miss a single detail. 2 days later, the family gathered again for a smaller lunch. Grandmother, Donna Amelia, was especially emotional. With trembling hands, she held a small blue velvet box. Inside lay an antique jewel, a sapphire and gold necklace that had been passed down from generation to generation. "This piece represents our family's history," she said, her voice fragile, "and I want Helena to keep it." The gesture took Raphael by surprise. He maintained a serene expression, but his stomach churned. Helena thanked him, hugging her grandmother with tears in her eyes. "I promise to take care of her with all my love," she said, with practiced sweetness. Marta watched the scene with pride, oblivious to her youngest son's discomfort. The father nodded, satisfied, believing he was sealing another bond of family unity. After lunch, Raphael walked alone through the garden, trying to process what had happened. The cold wind enveloped him as childhood memories flashed back. He and Helena playing hide-and-seek, sharing secrets and promises. Now, everything seemed distant. The jewel, he thought, symbolized more than inheritance. It represented favoritism, and this silently wounded him. That same night, Helena stared at the necklace in her room. The stone's shine reflected in her tired eyes. Her cell phone vibrated on her dresser. A message from an international number flashed on the screen. "Final warning. You have 48 hours." Fear made her grip the necklace tightly, feeling the weight of the sapphires like the weight of her own guilt. While Raphael slept, Helena lay awake, staring at the mirror. "Everything will be all right," she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew. The plan beginning to emerge in her mind would have consequences neither of them could have foreseen. Helena woke early that Monday, her heart racing even before sunrise. She opened her laptop and reviewed the messages from the American loan shark. Direct threats, unpayable sums, absurd interest rates. Regret burned like acid. She remembered when, months earlier, she'd believed in an investment opportunity at a New York art gallery. Now she was trapped in a web of lies and fear. The calls didn't stop. An unknown number appeared on the screen every 10 minutes, and the cold voice on the other end always said the same thing: either pay up or disappear. Helena trembled. She'd sold handbags, watches, furniture, but thousands of dollars were still missing. Her grandmother's jewelry seemed at that moment the only way out. "It's just a temporary loan," she repeated to herself, trying to believe her own excuse. At work, her mind was far away. Her colleagues noticed her nervousness, but she hid it with mechanical smiles. That night, when she got home, she found a new message. "We know where your family lives." The words chilled her blood. It was then that the dark idea began to form, an idea that blended desperation and ingenuity. Helena spent hours devising the plan. She knew that if the jewel disappeared and the evidence pointed to Raphael, no one would suspect her. After all, her brother had always been the reserved one, the rebel, the one who preferred to work with his hands rather than follow the family business. Circumstances, she thought, would do the rest. When the clock struck midnight, Helena walked to her father's office. She opened a drawer where the necklace was kept and stared at it for a long seconds. "I'll give it back, I swear," she murmured as she put it in her pocket. But deep down, she already knew that this choice would change everything forever. The house was silent when Helena began to act. Every step was calculated, every movement timed. She wore thin gloves and a small flashlight, just enough to see the safe built into the wall. Her heart was pounding loudly, and she feared the sound would echo down the hallway. With a trembling hand, she opened the safe with the code she had once heard her father dictate. There was the necklace, gleaming, almost alive. Helena took a deep breath before replacing the fake deposit slip in the safe, a document that, on the surface, linked Raphael to a suspicious transfer. Then she retrieved a small wooden box from his room and placed inside a dust-covered glove and a doctored invoice. The scene was set. When her father noticed it was missing, it would all seem too obvious. Before leaving, she looked around, imagining what Raphael would say when he was accused. She remembered her younger brother, the same one who used to defend her in childhood fights. A tear fell, but she quickly wiped it away. "Just until everything's sorted out. Then I'll explain," she whispered to the void, trying to believe it. The next morning, Augusto went down to his office and noticed the door ajar. The safe was empty. The shock drained his face. Helena, hiding her nervousness, was the first to appear, feigning concern. They called everyone in the house. The tension was thick as smoke. When Raphael entered, still drowsy, he found everyone staring at him. "Do you have something to say?" his father asked coldly. Raphael, confused, denied it. But when the evidence began to appear, the doctored invoice, the box, the fingerprints, the silence turned to accusation. Helena looked away, unable to face her brother as the lie took shape before everyone. The morning after the robbery, the Albuquerque household was abuzz. Augusto paced back and forth, his face flushed with rage, while Marta tried to calm him down. "There has to be an explanation," she said, but her husband wouldn't listen. The empty safe was a personal insult. Helena, her expression controlled, watched the chaos she had created unfold before her. Raphael went downstairs, still not understanding what was happening. "Did you mess with the office yesterday?" his father asked bluntly. Raphael shook his head, confused, but Augusto had already gathered the evidence, the doctored receipt, the dirty glove, the false evidence. "This was in your box. Care to explain?" The silence that followed was sharp.
Marta clapped her hand over her mouth in shock. Helena feigned surprise, a perfect actress. "Dad, this is a mistake," Raphael said, trying to remain calm. "I would never touch Grandma's jewelry." But Augusto wouldn't hear of it. "Enough lies. I always defended you, but now I see I was wrong." The words fell like hammers. Raphael looked to his sister for support, and what he found was a blank, impenetrable gaze. Helena, inside, begged her father to stop. She wanted to scream that it was all a mistake, but fear paralyzed her. Every second of silence ensnared her deeper in her own trap. When Augusto ordered Raphael to leave the house until he could prove his innocence, the lie became reality. Raphael left without a word, his face pale and his eyes wounded.
That night, Helena locked herself in her room. She looked at the necklace hidden in a travel bag and felt the weight of regret. The plan had worked, but the price seemed unbearable. Outside, the rain fell, and with each clap of thunder, the echo of guilt seemed louder. 2 days passed, and the atmosphere in the house was as heavy as lead. Marta barely ate, and Augusto remained secluded in his office. News of the robbery spread discreetly among acquaintances, and shame began to surround the Albuquerque family. Helena feigned illness, avoiding contact with everyone. But her father, suspicious by nature, began to sense something wasn't right. One morning, while reorganizing old papers, Augusto remembered a small security camera installed years ago in the office to protect important documents. A shiver ran down his spine. He turned on his computer, logged in, and fast-forwarded to the morning of the robbery. For a few seconds, there was only silence and shadows. Then, the image appeared. Helena, sneaking in, wearing gloves, the flashlight trembling in her hands. Augusto put his hand to his mouth, unable to believe it. He rewound. He watched it again. Shock gave way to anger, and anger to sadness. The daughter he trusted most had betrayed not only her brother, but the entire family. He stood motionless for long minutes, his face pale before the screen. He called Marta, who burst into tears upon seeing the video. She did this to her own brother?" she sobbed. Augusto turned off the monitor and sent for Helena. When she entered the office, she found her father with a hard look in his eyes and her mother in tears. "Would you like to explain this to me?" he asked, turning the screen toward her. The silence was absolute. Helena tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The images spoke for themselves. Marta fell to her knees, weeping. Augusto, his voice trembling, simply said, "Leave this house, now." The secret she thought buried had become public, and her downfall had just begun. Helena left the house without looking back. The rain fell heavily, soaking the small suitcase she dragged along the sidewalk. Inside, the necklace was wrapped in a silk scarf, the same one her grandmother wore on Sunday afternoons. The cold wind bit her face, but nothing hurt more than her father's gaze etched in her mind. "Leave this house, now." The words echoed like a sentence. In the following days, she sold the necklace to a trusted antique dealer, receiving less than half its true value. With the money, she paid off part of the debt and bought a ticket abroad. In her farewell note, she wrote a few lines. "Forgive me. One day, perhaps, you will understand." She left the note under her mother's pillow and disappeared. Rumors of her escape spread quickly. Some said she had been seen in Miami. Others claimed she had been in an accident. Time passed, and the mystery deepened. When the body of an identified woman was found months later in a river in the United States, the family believed it was Helena. The mourning, though uncertain, was experienced as definitive.
Raphael, upon hearing the news, didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted revenge. Another part, the deepest part, regretted not having had the chance to hear an apology. He withdrew into his work, avoiding any mention of the past. Marta, devastated, sank into a silence that would haunt her for years. Meanwhile, somewhere anonymous, Helena was changing her identity. She lived off odd jobs, moving from city to city frequently, fleeing not from debt collectors, but from herself. Guilt consumed her, and every unfamiliar face reflected the brother she had destroyed. 8 years passed. The Albuquerque home, once filled with laughter and celebrations, had become a silent place. Time had left its mark on the walls and people. Marta aged quickly, and Augusto, dejected, clung to his routine like a castaway to wood. Rafael, now a jewelry restorer, lived a discreet and solitary life. He worked in a small workshop downtown, surrounded by broken clocks, broken necklaces, and memories he'd rather forget. The constant sound of tools kept him occupied. Every now and then, he'd glance at an old family photograph, taken before everything fell apart. Helena smiled in that portrait, and he wondered if that smile had ever been real. Marta, still haunted by her daughter's absence, prayed every night. She kept the farewell note folded inside her Bible, yellowed with age. Augusto, for his part, avoided talking about the subject. He said that the past is dead, but his eyes betrayed otherwise. Helena's name was a taboo that hung between them like a shadow that never left. One day, Rafael was called to restore an antique necklace that the client claimed was a family heirloom. Upon opening the box, he felt a shiver run through his body. The sapphires, the shape of the stones, the curve of the chain, it was his grandmother's jewel, the same necklace that had disappeared. A shiver ran down his spine. Was it a coincidence? With trembling hands, he examined the necklace and saw something engraved on the clasp, the initials H.A. Helena Albuquerque. The world stopped for a moment. The jewel had returned, like an echo from the past demanding to be heard, and Rafael understood that one way or another, fate had not yet finished its story with his sister. The sound of the bell echoed through the small church as Augusto's coffin was placed before the altar. Marta, dressed in black, could barely stand. Rafael held her hand tightly, his face drawn by loss and the memories that came flooding back. His father had died of a sudden heart attack, and although his advanced age was an excuse, Rafael knew the true weight that had taken him was regret. Family and former friends filled the space with low murmurs. Lit candles cast shadows on the walls, and the air seemed trapped in a cycle of grief and guilt. Rafael, standing beside the coffin, stared at his father's serene face, remembering their last conversation, a brief exchange of glances full of things never said.
During the wake, the priest began the prayer, and everyone stood. Marta sobbed, leaning on her son. Then, in the middle of the ceremony, the temple door opened with a long creak. The wind blew in, extinguishing one of the candles. Everyone turned. At the entrance, a dark-haired woman, thin and pale, watched in silence. For a moment, no one breathed. The mother dropped the handkerchief from her hands. Rafael felt his heart stop. The woman stepped forward hesitantly, and a murmur filled the room. "Is that her? Helena?" Disbelief mingled with astonishment. His dead sister had come back to life in front of everyone, in the middle of his father's funeral. Helena walked to the coffin, her eyes welling up. "Forgive me, Father," she whispered, touching the coffin with trembling hands. Marta collapsed into the arms of a relative, and Rafael simply watched, unsure if he was living a dream or a nightmare. The woman who had destroyed his family was back, alive, and bearing the mark of all her mistakes on her face. The silence after the wake was deafening. Helena sat on the empty bench in the churchyard, surrounded by suspicious gazes.
Raphael approached slowly, unsure of what to say. "You are alive," he murmured, his voice breaking. She nodded, unable to look him in the eye. "I'm sorry, Raphael. I needed to disappear." Her words were fragile, almost broken. She recounted, through tears, how she had lived for years in hiding in the United States under an assumed name, working in cafes and cleaning houses to survive. She said that fearing debt collectors, she faked her own death and was never able to return. But upon learning of her father's death, something forced her to face the past. "I needed to be here, even if no one wanted me anymore." Raphael listened to her, his face unreadable. Hatred and longing mingled within him, confusing everything. "You killed your father out of grief," he said, his voice low but firm. Helena wept, tears streaming down her face like a delayed punishment. "I know, and I will carry this to the end." Martha, seeing them, approached slowly. Her motherly gaze surpassed that of any judge. She touched her daughter's face and silently hugged her. "You're back, and that's what matters." Raphael turned his face away, feeling the weight of his mother's compassion. He wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. As they left the church, the sky began to lighten, tinged with golden hues. Helena looked at her brother before leaving. "I didn't come to ask for anything, Rafa. I just want to fix what's left." He didn't respond. But deep down she knew this reunion was just the beginning of a new storm. Helena spent the next few days staying at a simple inn in the city, avoiding the press and prying eyes. Every step she took felt like a painful return to the memories she tried to bury. Her father's still fresh grave in the cemetery was a cruel reminder of lost time. Raphael, despite his anger, couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to hear her, to understand what had really happened. That rainy afternoon, he arrived at the inn. Helena greeted him with puffy eyes and a shy smile, the same one she'd used as a child to apologize. "You should hate me," she said. "You really should," he replied, crossing his arms. "But I just want to understand." She took a deep breath and began to speak, as if opening an old wound. She told everything: the financial scam, the unpayable debt, the threats from American loan sharks. She said that, in desperation, she took the jewel, believing she could resolve the situation and then return the necklace. But when the plan spiraled out of control and Raphael was accused, fear paralyzed her. "I wanted to confess, but my father looked at me like I was a stranger." The tears flowed unabated. "I didn't run away out of cowardice. I ran to protect you. They knew where we lived. If I stayed, they'd come after us all." Raphael remained silent, his gaze distant. "You destroyed our family, Lena. And now you want me to believe it was to protect us?" Helena stared at him, her eyes welling up. "I'm not asking you to believe me. I just want you to know that I've never stopped regretting it." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Raphael left without saying goodbye, but something in his expression had changed, as if the fury had begun to give way to doubt. 2 days later, the cemetery was empty when Helena arrived with flowers. The wind rustled the dry leaves, and the distant sound of bells echoed in the chilly afternoon. She knelt before her father's headstone, her fingers trembling against the cold stone. "Father, I know you'll never forgive me, but Rafa needs it, and I don't know if I deserve it." As she spoke, a shadow approached. Raphael was there, standing behind her, his dark coat draped over his shoulders. "I thought I'd find you here," he said in a low voice. Helena stood up, surprised, and stared at him with red eyes. "I shouldn't have come, but I really needed to say goodbye." Raphael took a few steps forward. "Forgive me? After destroying everything? Suppressed anger exploded in his voice. "You lied, made me a thief, killed your father out of shame, and now you come back as if a confession erased everything?" Helena wept, her tears mixing with the light rain that was beginning to fall. "I don't want to erase anything, Rafa. I want to pay." The silence fell like a stone. He took a deep breath, his face split between hatred and longing. "Do you have any idea what I've been through? What Mom went through?" Helena knelt, sobbing. "I know, and I would trade everything to undo that day." Raphael closed his eyes, fighting back his own tears. "But you can't, and nothing will bring Dad back." Helena lowered her head, defeated. "Then hate me, if that helps." He approached slowly, his face weary. "I can't." For a moment, it was just the two of them, the sound of the rain and the grave between them. Raphael reached out, touching his sister's shoulder. "I don't forgive you yet, Lena, but I want to try." The embrace that followed didn't erase the past, but it was the first step towards healing it.
The next dawn brought a light mist over the city. Raphael walked to his studio, still processing what had happened at the cemetery. His sister's face, the words spoken in the rain, the tense embrace, everything jumbled together in his mind like a confused dream. No matter how hard he tried to feed his hatred, something in him began to dissolve. The weight of years of resentment no longer fit in his chest. While polishing an old bracelet, he noticed something different. For the first time in a long time, he felt like talking, like starting over. That afternoon, he sent a short message. "Come here." Helena arrived hesitantly, with the same remorseful air that had accompanied him since the funeral. He greeted her silently, offering her a cup of coffee. "Do you have much to say?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Just what's left." Helena surveyed the studio, the objects gleaming under the yellow light. "You always liked fixing what was broken," she said, almost nostalgically. Raphael smiled slightly. "But not everything can be fixed." She lowered her head, understanding his meaning. "Maybe not, but I can try to help." After a few minutes, Raphael opened a drawer and took out a small box. Inside lay the restored necklace, the same sapphires that had once separated them. "I restored it," he said. Helena brought her hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. "It's more beautiful than before." He nodded. "Yes, just like things that break and mend over time." It was then that he looked into her eyes and in a low voice said, "I forgive you." Helena wept silently. There were no speeches, just a hug that dissolved years of pain and guilt. For the first time, they both felt the weight of family transform into something lighter, more human. In the following months, Helena decided to stay in the city. She began helping Raphael in his studio, learning the trade of the hands that mended the past. At first, clients were surprised by her presence. After all, the Albuquerque family's history was still a source of whispers. But time gradually silenced the sharp tongues. Marta, seeing her children working together, rediscovered the peace she'd thought she'd lost. Sometimes she'd enter the studio just to watch them in silence. The sound of the tools, once cold, had become a healing music. "Father would be happy," she'd say, smiling tenderly. And Raphael, for the first time in years, smiled back. Helena rediscovered herself every day. Her hands, once trembling with guilt, now patiently shaped small jewels. It was as if each piece returned a fragment of the woman she had been before her mistake. At night, she would write letters to her father, which she never sent, words of regret and love that burned after reading. One afternoon, Raphael found one of these letters forgotten on the counter.
He read it silently and smiled. "You know, Lena, I think your father forgave you a long time ago. He was just waiting for you to do the same." She smiled back, her eyes welling up. "Maybe so."
The studio prospered. With each restored piece of jewelry, the brothers seemed to also be rebuilding pieces of their history. The family home, now renovated, once again featured dinners, laughter, and the sound of their mother's piano. Forgiveness, after all, doesn't erase the past, but it teaches us how to live with it. The morning sun streamed through the studio curtains, casting golden reflections over the work tables. Helena was finishing polishing a piece when she heard the mailman knock on the door. She received a manila envelope with no return address and a foreign stamp. Upon opening it, her body froze. Inside was a typed letter with a single sentence: "There are still debts to settle." The signature was a name she recognized immediately, that of the loan shark who had harassed her years ago. For a moment, the past seemed to return with the same force as before. Her hands trembled, her eyes filled with tears. But unlike 8 years ago, she felt no fear, only a profound serenity. She took a deep breath, walked to the counter, and called Raphael over. "I think there's still a shadow out there," she said, showing him the letter. He read it silently, then looked at his sister and asked, "And what are you going to do?" Helena thought for a few seconds, then smiled sweetly. "Nothing. I've already paid enough." She took a lighter from the drawer, lit the flame, and held the paper close. The words began to disappear, turning to ash that danced in the air. The past finally burned and dissolved before her eyes. Raphael watched in silence, respecting the gesture, a ritual of liberation. Then Helena returned to the bench and picked up a new piece of jewelry being restored. She said, "Look at this," showing a ring that had been split in half. "It belonged to a client's mother. She asked me not to hide the crack. She wants me to highlight it with gold." Raphael smiled. "It's the Japanese technique of kintsugi. Fix the cracks with gold to show that scars are also part of beauty." Helena stared at the ring and whispered, "So this is what we are, Rafa. Shining scars." He nodded, moved. The silence that followed was tranquil, full of peace. Outside, the sun bathed the studio's facade in a soft light, as if the world too wanted to witness this new beginning. That evening, the family gathered in the old house for a simple dinner. Marta played the piano, and the sound filled the rooms with a melody of longing and hope. Helena looked at Raphael and for a moment saw her father's smiling face in his. The pain, the mistake, the forgiveness, all part of the same story. When the lights were dimmed, the restored necklace lay on the table, reflecting the candle flames. Each sapphire shone as if it held fragments of the past, and among them, the echo of a love that had withstood the test of time. Because some jewels, like some families, only reveal their true value after they're broken. This story proved that even the deepest wounds can shine again. If you believe that forgiveness is the most valuable new beginning there is, subscribe to the channel now and experience more stories that truly touch the heart.